At 06:15 on October 26, 1942, Captain Osborne Hardison stood on the flag bridge of USS Enterprise CV-6, watching the eastern horizon lighten as dawn approached. Enterprise was approximately 200 miles northeast of Guadalcanal, steaming at 27 knots as part of Task Force 16, searching for the Japanese carrier fleet that American intelligence indicated was approaching from the northwest. The search had been ongoing for 2 days. No contact had been made. But today would be different. Today, Enterprise would find the enemy carriers. Today would begin the Battle of Santa Cruz, the fourth carrier versus carrier engagement of the Pacific War. And by the end of today, Enterprise would be the last operational American carrier in the entire Pacific Ocean. Enterprise did not know this yet. Neither did the 200 men aboard her. They knew the strategic situation was desperate. The campaign for Guadalcanal was in its third month. Marines on Guadalcanal were holding Henderson Field against constant Japanese attacks. The Japanese Navy was running supplies and reinforcements to Guadalcanal nightly, a convoy system Americans called the Tokyo Express. American forces were stretched thin. Only 2 carriers were operational in the South Pacific Enterprise and Hornet CV-8. If both carriers were sunk or crippled, American air superiority would be lost. Guadalcanal would fall. The first American offensive of the Pacific War would fail. The strategic initiative would return to Japan. The stakes could not be higher. Enterprise's crew understood this. They had been fighting since December 7, 1941, when Enterprise had launched aircraft to attack Japanese forces bombing Pearl Harbor. They had fought at Marcus Island, Wake Island, the Doolittle Raid, Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Eastern Solomons. They were exhausted, operating on 4 hours of sleep per night, eating cold rations, working 18-hour shifts. But they were still fighting because someone had to fight. Someone had to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. Enterprise was that someone. And after today, she would be the only someone left. USS Enterprise CV-6 was laid down at Newport News Shipbuilding on July 16, 1934, as the second ship of the Yorktown class, a class of 3 fleet carriers that would become the backbone of American carrier operations in the early Pacific War. Enterprise was 809 feet long, with a beam of 83 feet and a flight deck width of 114 feet. She displaced 19 ton 800 tons, standard 25 500 tons fully loaded. Her propulsion consisted of 9 Babcock and Wilcox boilers, feeding Parsons-geared turbines generating 120,000 shaft horsepower, driving 4 screws, producing a maximum speed of 32.5 knots. Range was 12,500 nautical miles at 15 knots. Her air group consisted of approximately 90 aircraft fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers. Defensive armament in 1934 was minimal 8 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns and multiple smaller anti-aircraft weapons. This armament would be significantly increased throughout the war as the threat from Japanese aircraft became clear. Enterprise was launched on October 3, 1936 and commissioned on May 12, 1938. She spent her pre-war years training in the Pacific, conducting fleet exercises and preparing for a war everyone knew was coming. When war came on December 7, 1941, Enterprise was at sea 100 miles west of Oahu, returning from a mission to deliver Marine fighter aircraft to Wake Island. At over 800 hours, while Japanese aircraft were bombing Pearl Harbor, Enterprise was launching a routine dawn patrol. The patrol aircraft reached Oahu and found themselves in the middle of the Japanese attack. Several were shot down by Japanese fighters or American anti-aircraft fire that could not distinguish between friendly and enemy aircraft in the chaos. Enterprise immediately launched additional aircraft to attack Japanese forces, but by the time they arrived, the Japanese strike had departed. Enterprise had missed the battle by hours. Her crew was devastated. They had been at sea while their base was destroyed. They felt they should have been there. They would spend the next 4 years making up for missing that fight. Enterprise's first offensive action came on February 1, 1942, when she launched strikes against Japanese bases in the Marshall Islands. The raids achieved minimal damage but demonstrated that American carriers could strike Japanese positions and withdraw before being counterattacked. On March 4th, Enterprise raided Marcus Island, 1,000 miles from Japan. On April 18th, Enterprise provided escort for USS Hornet during the Doolittle Raid, the audacious mission that launched Army B-25 bombers from Hornet's deck to bomb Tokyo. Enterprise did not launch bombers herself, but provided fighter cover and anti-aircraft defense, ensuring Hornet could complete her mission. The defining moment of Enterprise's early war service came at the Battle of Midway, June 4–6, 1942. Enterprise was one of 3 American carriers defending Midway Island against a Japanese invasion force supported by 4 Japanese carriers. On the morning of June 4th, Enterprise launched dive bombers that arrived over the Japanese carrier fleet at exactly the moment when Japanese carriers were most vulnerable, rearming aircraft on their flight decks. Enterprise's dive bombers attacked the carriers Kaga and Akagi, achieving multiple hits that set both ships ablaze. The attacks, combined with strikes from Yorktown and Enterprise's second wave, destroyed 4 Japanese carriers in one day. Midway was the turning point of the Pacific War. Japan lost its offensive capability. America gained the strategic initiative. Enterprise's dive bombers had struck the decisive blow. After Midway, Enterprise supported the invasion of Guadalcanal in August 1942. The Guadalcanal campaign would consume American naval resources for 6 months, a grinding attrition battle where both sides committed carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers to control the waters around Guadalcanal. On August 24, 1942, Enterprise fought the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, engaging Japanese carriers supporting a reinforcement convoy. Enterprise's aircraft attacked the carrier Ryujo, achieving multiple bomb hits that sank her. But Japanese carrier aircraft counterattacked Enterprise. At 17:14 hours, Japanese dive bombers hit Enterprise with 3 bombs. The hits penetrated her flight deck, detonated in the hangar bay, and started fires. 74 men were killed. Enterprise's flight deck was damaged. She could not conduct air operations. She withdrew to Pearl Harbor for emergency repairs. The repairs took 6 weeks. Enterprise returned to the South Pacific in October 1942, rejoining Task Force 16. By then, the strategic situation at Guadalcanal had deteriorated. Japanese forces were preparing a major offensive to retake Henderson Field. Japanese carriers were approaching to provide air support. Enterprise and Hornet were the only American carriers available to oppose them. On October 26, 1942, the 2 forces found each other northeast of Guadalcanal. The Battle of Santa Cruz began at 6:50 hours when American and Japanese scout aircraft spotted each other's carrier forces simultaneously. Both sides launched strikes immediately. It became a race to see who could hit first. Enterprise launched 73 aircraft. Hornet launched 74 aircraft. The Japanese carriers Shokaku Zuikaku Zuiho and Junyo launched approximately 110 aircraft. The strikes passed each other in mid-air, heading toward their respective targets. At 0900 hours, American aircraft attacked the Japanese carriers. Enterprise's dive bombers hit Shokaku with multiple bombs, causing severe damage that would keep her out of action for 9 months. But the Americans paid heavily. Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire shot down over 40 American aircraft. At 0910 hours, Japanese aircraft found the American carriers. Hornet was attacked first. Japanese dive bombers and torpedo bombers swarmed her. Within 10 minutes, Hornet was hit by 2 bombs, 2 torpedoes, and 2 kamikaze crashes. She was ablaze, listing dead in the water. Hornet was finished. The Japanese strike then focused on Enterprise. At 0917 hours, Enterprise came under attack. Japanese dive bombers attacked from 10,000 feet. Enterprise's anti-aircraft guns opened fire, filling the sky with shell bursts and tracers. Captain Hardison maneuvered Enterprise violently, turning hard to port, then hard to starboard, changing course every 30 seconds. The violent maneuvering saved Enterprise from the first wave. Bombs landed close aboard, but none hit. But more aircraft were coming. At 0926 hours, a second wave of Japanese dive bombers attacked. Enterprise continued violent maneuvering. One bomb hit the forward flight deck edge, penetrating and detonating in a forward storage room. The explosion killed 12 men and started a fire. Damage control parties responded immediately. The fire was extinguished within minutes. At 0942 hours, a third wave attacked. Another bomb hit the flight deck near the aft elevator. The bomb penetrated and detonated in the hangar bay. The explosion destroyed aircraft stored in the hangar and started fires. More men were killed. Damage control parties fought the fires while the ship continued maneuvering and anti-aircraft guns continued firing. At 0944 hours, a damaged Japanese dive bomber already hit by anti-aircraft fire dove into Enterprise in a deliberate crash. The aircraft hit the forward flight deck, skidded across the deck, and fell off the side into the water. The crash caused minimal damage but killed several crew members on deck. By 1000 hours, the Japanese strike had departed. Enterprise had been hit by 2 bombs and 1 kamikaze crash. 44 men were killed. The flight deck was damaged in 2 places. Fires were burning in the hangar bay. But Enterprise was still operational. Her engines were undamaged. Her steering was functional. Damage control parties were fighting fires and repairing damage. Captain Hardison assessed the situation. Enterprise could still launch and recover aircraft if the flight deck damage could be repaired quickly. He ordered repair parties to patch the flight deck with steel plates. The work would take approximately 1 hour. At 1100 hours, while repairs were ongoing, a second Japanese strike arrived. This strike had been launched from the carrier Hunyo, which had not participated in the first strike. Approximately 30 aircraft attacked Enterprise. The attack was less coordinated than the first strike, but Enterprise was more vulnerable, dead in the water, while repair parties worked on the flight deck. At 1107 hours, a bomb hit the aft flight deck, penetrating and detonating in a crew berthing area. The explosion killed 44 men. Another bomb near-missed, exploding close aboard and causing underwater damage that flooded several compartments. Enterprise listed slightly to starboard. The damage was mounting, but the repair parties continued working. By 1130 hours, temporary patches had been welded over the flight deck holes. Enterprise could launch and recover aircraft. At 1300 hours, Captain Hardison ordered flight operations to resume. Enterprise began recovering her aircraft that had been circling since the attacks began, low on fuel. The landings were conducted on a damaged flight deck with holes patched by welded steel plates. Several aircraft crashed on landing due to damage or pilot exhaustion, but most landed safely. By 1400 hours, Enterprise had recovered most of her aircraft. The immediate crisis was over, but the strategic situation was grim. Hornet was sinking. Japanese destroyers were trying to scuttle her with torpedoes. American destroyers attempted to tow Hornet, but she was too damaged. At 2040 hours on October 26th, Hornet was torpedoed by Japanese destroyers and sank. Enterprise was now the only operational American carrier in the Pacific. The realization was stark. Enterprise was damaged, having taken 2 bomb hits and suffered over 80 casualties. Her air group was depleted, having lost over 20 aircraft. But she was the only American carrier available. The next closest American carrier was USS Saratoga CV-3, under repair at Pearl Harbor, and not expected to return to service for several weeks. Newly built carriers like Essex CV-9 were still working up and would not arrive in the Pacific until mid-1943. For the next 2 months, from late October 1942 through December 1942, Enterprise would be the only American fleet carrier operating in the Pacific Ocean. The entire American offensive at Guadalcanal depended on one ship. If Enterprise were sunk or crippled, Guadalcanal would be lost. Enterprise carried that burden alone. The period from October 26 to December 1942 was the most intense period of Enterprise's war. She operated continuously, launching strikes against Japanese positions on Guadalcanal, providing air cover for American surface forces, conducting search missions to locate Japanese ships, and fighting off Japanese air attacks. Her crew worked 18 to 20 hours per day. Pilots flew multiple missions daily. Mechanics worked through the night repairing aircraft. Damage control parties repaired battle damage while the ship remained operational. Everyone understood that if they failed, if Enterprise went down, the campaign was lost. On November 12–13, 1942, during the First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, Enterprise provided air support for American surface forces engaging Japanese battleships. Enterprise's aircraft attacked Japanese battleship Hiei, achieving bomb hits that contributed to her sinking. On November 14–15, during the Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, Enterprise aircraft attacked Japanese transports attempting to land reinforcements. The aircraft sank 7 transports, preventing Japanese troops from reaching Guadalcanal. These actions, conducted while Enterprise was the only American carrier operational, were decisive in turning the Guadalcanal campaign in America's favor. In early December 1942, USS Saratoga returned to the Pacific after repairs. Enterprise was no longer alone, but her ordeal was not over. Throughout 1943, Enterprise continued fighting. She supported operations in the Solomon Islands, participated in raids on Rabaul, and covered amphibious landings. She was present at nearly every major operation in the Pacific. Her nickname among her crew was the Big E. American propaganda called her the fightingest ship in the Navy. Japanese propaganda claimed to have sunk Enterprise multiple times. Tokyo Rose announced Enterprise's sinking on several occasions. Each time, Enterprise was still fighting. By 1944, Enterprise had been in combat for 3 years. She was showing her age, her machinery was worn, her hull was stressed from years of high-speed operations, but she continued fighting. She participated in the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, where American carriers destroyed Japanese carrier aviation in the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. She participated in the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, the largest naval battle in history. She supported operations in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. On May 14, 1945, off Okinawa, Enterprise was struck by a kamikaze that penetrated her flight deck and exploded in the hangar bay. The explosion killed 14 men and caused significant damage. Enterprise was withdrawn for repairs. The repairs took until June 1945. Enterprise returned to combat in July 1945, conducting strikes against the Japanese home islands. She was still fighting when Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Enterprise had fought for 3 years, 8 months, and 8 days from December 7, 1941 to August 15, 1945. She had participated in every major carrier battle of the Pacific War except Coral Sea, where her sister ship Yorktown fought. She had earned 20 battle stars, the most of any American warship in World War II. She had launched over 100,000 aircraft sorties. Her aircraft had sunk or damaged hundreds of Japanese ships and aircraft. She had been hit by bombs, torpedoes, and kamikazes multiple times. She had never been out of action for more than 6 weeks. She had survived when every other pre-war American carrier except Saratoga had been sunk. Lexington was sunk at Coral Sea. Yorktown was sunk at Midway. Wasp was sunk at Guadalcanal. Hornet was sunk at Santa Cruz. Only Enterprise and Saratoga survived. And Enterprise had fought more battles than any of them. After the war, Enterprise returned to the United States. She participated in Operation Magic Carpet, transporting American servicemen home from the Pacific. By 1946, Enterprise was worn out. Her machinery was beyond economical repair. Newer, larger carriers like the Essex class were available. Enterprise was expensive to maintain for a peacetime Navy with budget constraints. In 1946, Enterprise was decommissioned and placed in reserve. There were calls to preserve Enterprise as a museum ship. She was the most decorated warship in American history. She deserved to be preserved. But preservation required money. The Navy had no budget for it. Private fundraising efforts failed to raise sufficient funds. In 1958, Enterprise was sold for scrap. She was broken up at Kearny, New Jersey in 1960. Nothing remains except artifacts scattered in museums, a piece of her bow in the Washington Navy Yard, and her name, which was given to the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, CVN-65, commissioned in 1961. The technical analysis of Enterprise's survival reveals superior damage control. American carriers were designed with extensive compartmentalization, redundant systems, and well-trained damage control parties. When Enterprise was hit, damage control parties responded within seconds. Fires were fought immediately. Flooding was controlled. Damaged systems were bypassed or repaired. The crew's training and the ship's design allowed Enterprise to absorb damage that would have sunk less capable ships. Japanese carriers, by contrast, had minimal damage control capabilities. When hit, fires spread quickly. Damage control parties were insufficient. Ships were lost from damage that American carriers survived. The comparison between Enterprise's survival and the loss of her sister ship Hornet at Santa Cruz is instructive. Both ships were hit by Japanese aircraft on the same day. Hornet was hit by 2 bombs, 2 torpedoes, and 2 kamikaze crashes. Enterprise was hit by 3 bombs and 1 kamikaze. Hornet sank. Enterprise survived. The difference was partly luck. Hornet took more hits but also damage control. Enterprise's crew fought fires and controlled flooding more effectively. Hornet's damage control was overwhelmed. The difference between survival and sinking was often just a few minutes the time it took for damage control parties to reach a fire before it spread out of control. The psychological analysis reveals the importance of morale and leadership. Enterprise's crew knew they were the last carrier. They knew the entire campaign depended on them. That knowledge created enormous pressure but also determination. Men worked beyond exhaustion because they understood the stakes. Captains and admirals commanding Enterprise throughout the war maintained morale through leadership. They were visible to the crew, they shared the dangers, they made decisions that balanced mission accomplishment with crew safety. The crew trusted their officers. That trust allowed the ship to function under stress that would have broken less cohesive units. The strategic analysis reveals that from October 26, 1942 to December 1942, American offensive operations in the Pacific depended on one ship. This was extraordinarily risky. If Enterprise had been sunk during that period, American forces at Guadalcanal would have lost air support. Japanese forces would have regained air superiority. The campaign would likely have failed. American strategy would have shifted from offense to defense. The entire course of the Pacific War might have changed. That one ship carried that much strategic importance reveals how close America came to losing the Guadalcanal campaign. Enterprise was not just a ship. She was the linchpin of American strategy for 2 critical months. The human cost of Enterprise's service was significant. Over the course of the war, approximately 10,000 men served aboard Enterprise at various times. Over 400 were killed in action. Hundreds more were wounded. The survivors carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. Many developed what would now be diagnosed as PTSD. They had nightmares about battles, startled at loud noises, struggled with civilian life after experiencing continuous combat for years. Some never recovered. But most were proud of their service. They had served on the most decorated warship in American history. They had fought in every major battle. They had won the war. After Enterprise was scrapped in 1960, her veterans formed the USS Enterprise Association to preserve her memory. They held reunions, collected memorabilia, advocated for the name to be honored. When CVN-65 was commissioned in 1961, the 6 veterans attended the ceremony. The nuclear carrier inherited the name and the legacy. CVN-65 served for 51 years from 1961 to 2012, the longest service of any American carrier. She was succeeded by CVN-80, currently under construction, which will also bear the name Enterprise. The name will never die because CV-6's legacy ensures it. The legacy of USS Enterprise CV-6 is her demonstration that persistence, toughness, and courage can overcome overwhelming odds. Enterprise fought for nearly 4 years without major respite. She was hit repeatedly, she lost hundreds of men, she was damaged multiple times, but she kept fighting. When she was the last carrier, she carried the burden alone. When reinforcements arrived, she continued fighting alongside them. She never quit. She never surrendered. She was the embodiment of the American fighting spirit, taking hits and hitting back, absorbing damage and continuing the mission, losing battles but winning the war. The comparison with other famous ships reveals Enterprise's uniqueness. HMS Hood was the pride of the Royal Navy and was sunk in her first major battle. Bismarck fought one sortie and was sunk. Yamato fought minimally and was sent on a suicide mission. Even American ships like USS Johnston, heroic though they were, fought one decisive battle and were lost. Enterprise fought in every major battle and survived. She accumulated battle damage that would have sunk other ships multiple times over. She kept fighting because her crew refused to let her die. That persistence, that refusal to quit, made Enterprise the most successful warship of World War II. In 1969, President Richard Nixon presented the Presidential Unit Citation to USS Enterprise CV-6, citing her indomitable fighting spirit and its ability to inflict heavy damage on the enemy, despite heavy damage to itself. The citation was awarded posthumously 9 years after Enterprise had been scrapped. But the recognition was important. It acknowledged officially what her crew had known for decades. Enterprise was more than a ship. She was a symbol of American resolve, the carrier that refused to die, the ship that fought alone when no one else could fight, the Big E that carried the war on her flight deck and in the hearts of her crew. USS Enterprise CV-6, Yorktown-class fleet carrier, commissioned May 12, 1938. Decommissioned February 17, 1947, scrapped 1960. Length 809 feet, displacement 25,500 tons, air group 90 aircraft, top speed 32.5 knots. Battle honors 20 battle stars, Presidential Unit Citation, Navy Unit Commendation, more than any other American warship in World War II. Combat record: participated in virtually every major carrier battle of the Pacific War: Wake Island, Marcus Island, Doolittle Raid, Midway, Guadalcanal, Eastern Solomons, Santa Cruz, Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Japanese home islands. Aircraft sorties over 100,000. Enemy ships sunk or damaged, hundreds. The period when Enterprise was the only operational American carrier in the Pacific, October 26, 1942 to December 1942. Strategic importance during that period total. If Enterprise had been lost, Guadalcanal would have been lost. She was not lost. She fought alone. She carried the burden. She held the line until reinforcements arrived. She was the original Big E, the carrier that fought in every major Pacific battle. The ship that refused to die, the fightingest ship in the Navy, USS Enterprise CV-6, the Gray Ghost. The ship that won the war.